If you're planning on doing a big budget superhero movie and setting it underwater, you'd better get on the phone to just about every VFX house in the world. So that is what they did. ILM, Method Studios, Scanline, Rodeo, MPC, Luma Picture, Double Negative, Weta Digital and Digital Domain all came together to create over 3,000 VFX shots, of which 2,300 ended up in the final cut. The biggest environment they created was the city of Atlantis. VFX artists created over 200 different types of buildings, including the iconic jellyfish buildings. Districts were made covering almost 600 square miles and containing over 7,000 buildings. Over 150,000 ships built from designs from the art department and modified to work in 3D were used to fill the traffic lanes into Atlantis. Sea creatures such as dolphins and whales, and marine vegetation, and coral were added to help anchor this fantasy world to reality. With such a big city full of colourful lights, organic materials and translucent materials, the biggest challenge was to render it all. The trench creatures required multiple levels of simulations. The first step was to create a full body muscle simulation where the artists could adjust the stretching and bulging of the muscles whilst still remaining fully dynamic. The second was simulating the fat and tissue. Next was a skin simulation, and lastly, they simulated the fins and spines. Due to a large number of secondary trench creatures, they had to optimize their workflow so that the creature VFX artists could simulate any number of creatures at the same time. However, Hero Trench had full skin and muscle simulations, customized for each shot. As with most complicated shots, rendering is always a worry. The average shot during the trench attack had up to 60 high-resolution creatures, all with muscle and fin simulations, in addition to thousands of creatures in the water and a huge ocean simulation. Where even the impacts of raindrops were 3D. The team were conscious of this potential rendering problem from the start, and so kept efficiency in mind when building their assets. The creature effects team created very fast and stable simulation setups for the muscles and fins. The Flowline team also optimized simulation times and data usage for water simulations, and the lighting team brought it all together using Scanline's custom procedural rendering pipeline, ensuring fast rendering and minimal possible memory consumption. Due to the large portion of the movie that was set underwater, it was obvious that the film was to be shot dry for wet. The VFX team spent a lot of time creating the look that the director was searching for. The director wanted colour, contrast and clarity in the water, but with strong light and shadow, so the VFX teams developed tools to do accurate colour attenuation and light diffusion, including a control curve to control how fast the attenuation built up. They also added moving vegetation, flowering caustics, strong light rays, blue loom on light sources, bubbles, and particle passes to sell the underwater feel. The actors were also shot dry for wet. The actors performed on gimbal rigs to simulate underwater movement. The VFX team used as much of these performances as possible, in some cases replacing an actor's limb, in others the whole body. For this, they had custom rigs which allowed the animators to keep the actors' faces locked, whilst they worked on adjusting the body movement. In some of the more extreme action scenes, a full digi-double was used. Early on, they knew that they couldn't just have the Atlanteans moving in the water the way humans do. The Atlanteans existed underwater, it was their medium, and so it was only natural for them to move freely within their medium. However, by exaggerating and enhancing the Atlanteans' movements, there was always a danger of making them look as though they were in zero gravity rather than underwater. To maintain the illusion of every direction or velocity change a character was to make, they added a counter movement for limbs, making it look as though they were pushing off something. Perhaps one of the biggest and hardest parts of all was the hair. The director wanted long, beautiful flowing locks that referenced the comic books. The VFX teams gathered together hours of video on how hairs clump together, separate, and flow behind a swimmer as they move forward. They used this reference material to help develop their haircraft tools to handle the problems with long hair underwater. One of the biggest problems is that hair systems are built on interpolating hairs between guides. However, underwater guides can go anywhere. This led to parallel interpolated hair just sticking out. To solve this, they had to simulate more guides to ensure they had the edge break up and the complexity they needed. The hair didn't just have to move realistically, it had to look great too. It couldn't fall in front of the actor's face or get in his eyes as real hair would. It had to be styled. To achieve this, they built up a library of pre-sim hairstyles for the start of the shot, and then they used a robust set of sculpting tools to adjust the hair in post-sim. The odd thing they found was that the shots with a lot of action were actually easier to do than those just standing still. Please give us a like if you enjoyed this video. Don't forget the links to the music used in the video in the video description, and be sure to let us know in the comments section, as always, which movie VFX you'd like to see behind next.